People often say time heals everything, but that isn't true. Some wounds don't fade, they simply become part of who you are. If you visited my quiet street in Malibu, you'd know me only as Margaret, the 72-year-old lady with the blooming garden, a gentle smile, and a son who grew up to be very successful. You'd see the calm in my eyes, but not the storms I once survived. No one here knows that when I was just 11 years old, an age meant for hopscotch, hair ribbons, and spelling tests, I was locked inside a freezing root cellar by my own father. Not for misbehaving, not for a childish mistake, but because I was carrying a baby. A baby conceived through the worst kind of betrayal, by my father's own brother. For more than 6 decades, I carried that truth alone. A secret too heavy to hold, yet too dangerous to speak aloud. Today, for the first time, I'm placing that weight down. And if my story reaches you anywhere in the world, I hope you listen with an open heart. Some truths hurt, but they must still be told. I grew up in Fairview, a tiny town straddling the Texas or Oklahoma border. The kind of place where neighborly smiles hid sharp gossip, and privacy was a luxury no one had. Our home sat a little apart from the rest, just a simple wood-framed house with a chicken coop, a vegetable patch, and my mother's flowers that somehow managed to bloom despite everything. My father, Robert, owned a small general store. People respected him. They admired his stern voice, his strict rules, and his business sense. But inside our home, his authority felt like a loaded gun. We never knew what might set him off. When he came home, silence followed him like a shadow. Even our dog learned to hide when he heard my father's boots on the porch. My mother, Patricia, was everything he wasn't. Gentle, soft-spoken, always busy in the kitchen or garden. She baked pumpkin pies scented with clove, pies that drew neighbors like bees to honey. But the sadness she carried in her eyes hinted at stories she never dared to tell. There were 3 of us children. James, my older brother, worked beside my father from the age of 7. Susan, my little sister, was pure sunshine, never still, always laughing. And me, the quiet middle child who learned early how to move through life softly so as not to disturb anyone. We lived simply. We lived cautiously. We obeyed. And for a while, childhood felt almost safe. But everything changed the year my Uncle Richard came back to Fairview. Rehook. Because the moment Uncle Richard stepped into our house, the first shadow of a nightmare began to fall, and none of us could see the storm coming. Uncle Richard arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day when nothing remarkable was supposed to happen. I remember hearing the gravel crunch under the tires of his old truck and seeing my father stiffen the moment he recognized the sound. That was the first sign something was wrong. My father feared no one. Yet when Richard stepped out of that truck, tall and broad-shouldered with a confident grin, my father's jaw tightened. Richard was my father's younger brother, but the two couldn't have been more different. Where my father was controlled and stone-faced, Richard had an easy charm that drew people in. He laughed loudly, hugged without hesitation, and flirted shamelessly with any woman who'd listen. People in Fairview called him the Wild One, but no one really knew him. Not the way we would. Inside our home, his presence changed everything. My mother went quiet, her hands shaking whenever she served him dinner. My father watched him with a simmering anger that never boiled over but was always present, like a pot left on low heat. Susan adored him instantly. He brought her candy, lifted her into the air, and called her a little firecracker. James tolerated him, probably because father insisted he do so. But me? I didn't know what to think. At first, he was warm toward me. Too warm. His compliments felt too pointed, his touches lingered a second too long. I was only 11, and I didn't fully understand what made me uncomfortable. I only knew something inside me tightened whenever he entered the room. I learned to avoid being alone near him, though I didn't know then just how impossible that would soon become. Weeks passed, and Richard stayed longer than anyone expected. My father never said why, but tension between the two grew thicker each day. One night, I overheard them arguing. Richard's voice was sharp, mocking. My father's was low and dangerous. I couldn't hear the exact words, but the tone was enough to carve fear into my bones. The change in my mother was even more unsettling. She walked the house with a permanent tremble, as if waiting for a storm she couldn't escape. Her eyes followed me constantly, full of worry she never voiced. More than once, she pulled me close and whispered, "Stay in the kitchen with me, sweetheart. Don't go off alone." I didn't understand why then, but I do now. She saw it before anyone else. She saw the danger creeping toward me long before it reached out and seized my life. Because the night everything changed, started with just one knock on my bedroom door. Hook. That knock was soft, gentle, almost, but what waited behind it would shatter my childhood forever. The knock on my bedroom door came just after midnight. Soft, careful, measured. At first, I thought it was Susan. She often woke from nightmares and slipped into my bed. But when I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I sensed instantly that something was different. The hallway beyond the door was silent. Too silent. Another knock. This time, slower, and unmistakably adult. My heartbeat quickened. I slid quietly from my bed, my feet cold against the wooden floor. I didn't open the door. I only leaned toward it, listening. "Margaret," a low whisper called. "It's me. Open up." Uncle Richard. A chill spread through my entire body. "I'm sleeping," I said, barely above a whisper. "I just opened the door, sweetheart," he murmured. "I need to talk to you." Something in his voice, something slick and sweet like spoiled syrup, made my stomach twist. I stepped back, gripping the edge of my thin nightdress. "I'll talk tomorrow," I said weakly, but his tone changed. He opened the door. "Now." The softness vanished, replaced with a command that sliced the air before I could react. The doorknob turned. I hadn't locked it. We weren't allowed to lock doors in our house. The door creaked open an inch, then another. Pure, paralyzing fear rooted me to the floor, but suddenly, footsteps thundered down the hallway. The door slammed shut. My brother James's voice rose, firm and furious. "What are you doing? You don't belong here." Richard snapped back. I was checking on her. She sounded upset. "She's fine. Go. Don't tell me what to do, boy." A tense, breathless moment hung in the air, then I heard my father's voice, sharp and deadly. "What's going on out here?" Silence. I stayed frozen, listening as the three of them exchanged heated words I couldn't fully make out. Then, abruptly, footsteps retreated, doors slammed, and the house fell quiet once more. I pressed my hand over my racing heart. In that moment, at 11 years old, I understood something terrifying. Richard was not just unsettling. He was dangerous. The next morning at breakfast, the atmosphere in the kitchen was suffocating. My father glared at Richard with an intensity that could have burned through steel. My mother kept glancing at me with eyes brimming with fear she couldn't hide. My brother avoided everyone's gaze, eating silently, jaw clenched tight. Richard acted as though nothing had happened, laughing, pouring himself coffee, patting Susan's head. But when his eyes met mine, there was a warning in them. A silent message. "Don't you dare say a word." The rest of that day passed in a haze. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound made me flinch. My mother hovered protectively, always finding an excuse to keep me near her, but she said nothing aloud. In our house, speaking the truth was as forbidden as locking a door. And yet deep inside me, a fear had begun to bloom. A quiet, trembling understanding that something terrible was stalking the edges of my life. And soon, it would strike. Hook. Because the next night, the danger didn't knock softly. It came boldly, bringing a darkness that would tear my childhood apart in a single, horrifying moment. The next night arrived with a strange heaviness in the air. The kind that makes the hairs on your arms rise for no reason at all. By sunset, my mother had insisted I stay in the kitchen with her. She chopped vegetables with shaky hands, glancing at the doorway every few seconds. She wasn't just nervous. She was terrified. At one point, she knelt beside me, brushing my hair back gently. "Stay near me tonight," as she whispered. Her voice trembled the way a candle flickers before it dies. I nodded, though I didn't understand the full weight of her fear. My father barely spoke during dinner, but the few words he did say were sharp and clipped. His stare never left Richard. They were two storms locked in silent collision, neither willing to strike first. Even Susan sensed the tension. She sat unusually still, her little hands fidgeting with her fork. By 9 p.m., the house had fallen into an easy quiet. My mother brewed chamomile tea for everyone, an old ritual meant to soothe, but nothing could calm the dread crawling under my skin. When it was finally time for bed, she hugged me longer than usual. "Keep your door closed," as she murmured. Her eyes glistened. "And if anything feels wrong, run to my room. Do you understand?" I nodded again. But I didn't realize then that danger doesn't always come from hallways and shadows. Sometimes it waits behind the people you trust. The night everything changed. I must have drifted to sleep for only a little while, because when I woke, the house was silent. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, but waiting. A faint light spilled in from the hallway. Voices whispered, low, urgent. I slid out of bed and crept toward my door. My hand had just touched the knob when I froze. My father's voice, cold and furious, cut through the stillness. "Get out of this house. Tonight." Then Richard's voice answered, slurred and angry. "You don't tell me what to do. I'm family." "Not anymore," and my father growled. A thud shook the wall. Furniture scraped. Someone cursed. I pressed my ear to the door, breath held tight. "Stay away from my daughters," and my father roared. My heart lurched. He knew. Maybe not everything, but he knew enough. My mother's voice entered then, desperate, pleading. "Please, Robert. Not in front of the children." Richard barked out a bitter laugh. "Oh, don't pretend you didn't know. You've always known." Something shattered. Glass, maybe a lamp. My mother screamed. Before I could think, my door was flung open from behind me. I stumbled backward, gasping. It was James. His face was pale, eyes wide with fear. "Come with me, now," he whispered fiercely. "What's happening?" I trembled. "No time." He grabbed my hand and pulled me into the hallway. My father and Richard were struggling, grappling like two animals. My mother tried to get between them, sobbing, begging them to stop. The scene was chaotic and terrifying, everything I'd ever feared erupting at once. James dragged me toward the back door, whispering urgently. "Dad said if anything happens, we take you outside. We need to hide." Hide? From our own uncle. from the grown-up who should have protected us. I could hear Richard snarling. She deserved it. You don't even know what she's been doing. My father's fist cut his words short. And that was the moment I understood. He wasn't denying it. He was defending me. And the truth was finally detonating inside our home. But escaping the house that night was only the beginning, because what happened after we ran into the darkness revealed secrets darker than anything we'd ever imagined. The cold night air hit us like a splash of ice water as James pulled me out the back door. The sky was moonless, the kind of black that felt endless. Crickets had gone silent, as if even nature sensed the danger spreading through our home. James kept a tight grip on my hand, practically dragging me across the yard toward the old storage shed behind the chicken coop. My bare feet stumbled over rocks and cold dirt, but fear pushed me forward. James, where are we going? I whispered, breath trembling. Here to the shed, he said. Dad told me earlier, if anything happened tonight, we hide there and wait. What does that mean? What's happening? He didn't answer. Couldn't. His breathing was ragged, his voice stuck somewhere between fear and fury behind us. The shouting inside our house grew louder, voices overlapping, something heavy striking the floor, my mother crying out. Every sound tightened my chest until it hurt to breathe. When we reached the shed, James yanked open the door, which groaned loudly on its rusted hinges. The air inside was damp and smelled of soil and old wood. He guided me in, shut the door, then slid the latch lock into place. We stood there in the darkness, the only light a thin sliver sneaking through a crack in the wood. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. We just listened. The distant chaos inside the house rose and fell like a violent storm. Then, suddenly, a single sound tore through the air, a scream. A man's, then a thud. I flinched. James held my shoulders. Don't move, he whispered. My knees began to shake. Is he going to hurt Dad? James swallowed hard. Dad can handle him. He's stronger. He's angry. That helps. I wasn't sure if he was comforting me or himself. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The shouting slowly faded into muffled thuds, then into complete silence. A silence far worse than the noise. James pressed his ear against the shed door, listening so intently that even his breath went quiet. Then, footsteps, slow, unsteady. Coming toward the backyard. James stiffened, signaling me to stay absolutely still. The footsteps drew closer, crunching over leaves and dirt. Someone was out there. Wandering. Searching. A shadow passed across the crack in the wood. My heart stopped for a moment. Time froze. Then a voice, low, slurred, venomous, filled the night. Where are you hiding? It was Richard. He wasn't defeated. He wasn't gone. He was out here looking for me. James clamped his hand over my mouth before I could gasp. We stood motionless as Richard staggered around the yard, muttering things I couldn't fully hear. Little liar. She ruined everything. Make her pay. Every word sliced through me like glass. At one point, his hand brushed against the shed door. I felt it through the wood. Just inches from us. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying he wouldn't open it. After what felt like an eternity, his footsteps slowly drifted away, fading into the far end of the yard. Then, silence again. James finally let out a shaky exhale. We can't stay here, he whispered. If he comes back. But where do we go? I trembled. He opened the shed door just enough to peer outside. We run, he said, to Mrs. Henderson's farm. She'll help us. The Hendersons lived almost a mile away. A mile through darkness. A mile with a predator wandering behind us, but we had no choice. James took my hand again. Stay close, he murmured. Don't let go. And together, we stepped into the dark night, not knowing the most horrifying part of the journey hadn't even begun. Because what we found on the road that night, and the truth it revealed, would change not just our lives, but the entire town forever. James and I slipped into the night like two shadows, keeping low as we moved along the fence line behind our house. The moon still hid behind thick clouds, giving us cover but making every step uncertain. My heart raced so violently I could feel it in my throat. Behind us, the house loomed like a dark, angry monster. At any moment, I expected to hear Richard again, expected to see his silhouette coming after me. James held my hand firmly, pulling me behind him as we crept across the field. "It will follow the creek," he whispered. "It's darker there. He won't find us." The creek ran behind a long stretch of oak trees, its path twisting toward the Henderson farm. The icy water soaked our sandals, numbing our feet as we walked, but neither of us complained. Fear drowned out everything else. For a while, all we heard was the trickle of water and the distant howl of a coyote. I kept glancing over my shoulder, imagining shapes moving in the dark. Halfway across the field, thunder rumbled overhead. Of course, a storm was coming, because the night wasn't terrifying enough already. James stopped suddenly and raised his hand for me to freeze. I followed his gaze. Ahead, blocking the path to the Hendersons, was a tall figure standing by the fence. A man still waiting. My breath hitched. "Is it?" "I don't know," James whispered. "Stay behind me." The wind picked up, tossing dust across the field. The figure shifted slightly, then stepped forward into the faint moonlight. Not Richard, not Dad, but someone we never expected to see. Mr. Briggs, the sheriff of Fairview. Except he wasn't in uniform. And the look in his eyes wasn't concern. It was fear. And guilt. "James," he whispered urgently, "you shouldn't be out here. Neither of you." He glanced back toward town, then leaned closer. "Something bad happened tonight at your house. Your mother sent me to find you before anyone else does." My stomach twisted. What happened?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The sheriff swallowed hard. "Your Uncle Richard is dead." The world tilted. I felt James grab my arm before my legs gave out. "He's dead?" James echoed. The sheriff nodded slowly. "And your father is hurt. Very badly. We're not sure." A bolt of lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the sheriff's distressed face. "What did Dad do?" James whispered. "Richard attacked him," the sheriff said. "The fight spilled into the yard. Your father defended himself, but by the time we got there..." He dragged a hand over his face, weary and shaken. "Kids, or we need to get you somewhere safe." My thoughts spun wildly. My father injured. My uncle dead. Our family destroyed in one night. The sheriff led us toward his truck. James held me close, shielding me from the rain that had begun to fall in heavy drops. As we climbed into the vehicle, lightning flashed again, and for the first time since the nightmare began, I saw clarity in my brother's eyes. "This is our chance," he whispered to me. "Our chance to leave all of this behind. For good." I didn't know then how right he was. That night, with the storm raging, with the sheriff driving us away from the ruins of our childhood, with the truth finally dragged into the open, my old life ended. And the long, painful, beautiful journey toward the woman I would become finally began. Final hook. Because sometimes the worst night of your life is the one that frees you.